Something you don't want out in the open, your address. More than 6 million Illinois voters had their street addresses and dates of birth published online this year by Lake Forest-based Local Government Information Services, or LGIS. Now, the company runs right-wing news sites that critics have called zombie papers. And the state of Illinois sued the company, and a judge ordered the addresses be redacted. But a WBEZ investigation finds that some of the info is still searchable online. So here to fill us in on what this could mean for you is Dave McKinney, WBEZ state politics reporter. Hey, Dave.
Hey, good afternoon, Sasha.
Tell us what we know about who exposed this information and what their motivation was.
Well, I mean, as you mentioned in the intro there, the company we're talking about is called Local Government Information Services. They're a company that operates about, I don't know, a little under 3 dozen websites that are statewide, and these things are derisively called pink slime operations by critics, because what they tend to do is that they present issues. They make their publications look like legitimate news outlets, but they are typically one-sided. They have a very partisan tilt toward Republicans. And this group got its hands on voter roll information that is restricted by the state.
How did they get their hands on that information in the first place?
Well, I mean, that's a good question, because what we know is that they have been aligned with a guy that runs that has run a couple of political committees in Illinois. These political committees have access to this voter roll information, which again is very detailed with birth dates, specific addresses for people, et cetera. A lawsuit that is pending against LGIS says that in 2016, the state believes that this company got it from one of the political committees that gained access to it. So it's a bit up in the air, but it's stuff that the state says they shouldn't have had.
Now, who exactly had their information exposed?
Well, a colleague of mine, Matt Kiefer, and I set out to kind of look into that question. This has been in court up in Waukegan in Lake County Circuit Court for several months now. The Attorney General's lawsuit said that there were, multiple thousands of people. We wanted to go deeper, and so what we did was we built this device to basically go through all of LGIS's websites where some of this stuff is still posted. And we tabulated about 6.2 million people who were identified. And the real focus for us was how, a lot of these people are in jobs that are very sensitive jobs, particularly state and federal judges. And so, the fact that these folks went for a number of months this year having their specific street addresses was a real cause for concern.
Yeah. Well, so much so that Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul sued the group that exposed this personal information, saying that it violated state election law by publishing information that was only available to registered political action committees. Now, back in May, a judge that was overseeing this case ordered some of the information be removed. Give us a better sense of the scope of this, Dave. Were all addresses supposed to be removed?
Well, that was the order from the judge in Lake County. He said that street numbers were supposed to be taken down, as well as specific birth dates. And so what this company did then on its websites was they kept all of these lists of voters intact, millions of them, but they just simply published the birth year of individuals and then what street names they lived on.
And so you and former WBEZ data editor Matt Kiefer, you found that much of that personal information is still searchable today.
Well, it's true. I mean, not only, can you find certain information on their websites, this is sort of the stripped down stuff, but if you go to, some of the sites that do internet archiving, we found 76,000 names of people who continue to have their dates of birth and their home addresses available online because these services captured images from LGIS websites. We found a federal judge in that mix. We found, one of the members of the family that owns the Chicago Cubs on there as well. So I mean, there's still a lot of these names that are out floating on the internet right now with a lot of information still available.
I mean, and to that end, that this published information is putting a lot of those folks at risk, right? And this, to add to your list, David, includes domestic violence survivors, as well as prosecutors and the judges that you talked about. So tell us more about how big of a concern this is.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly by our calculations, we found more than 20 federal judges in Chicago whose addresses were publicized earlier this year. We found prosecutors and others in public corruption cases. We found people who were involved, in a highly sensitive narcotics case in Chicago that involves the prosecution of four sons of El Chapo and the foreign drug cartel. Supreme Court justices, state Supreme Court justices. So it runs the gamut of people in these sensitive jobs, and as you mentioned, domestic violence survivors, uh, human traffic, human trafficking survivors, both those groups of people. There's a service that the Attorney General operates that helps cloak addresses for those people,
Right.
and so there's a belief out of the Attorney General's office that many of them had their addresses exposed earlier this year as well.
What happened back in 2005, Dave, to U.S. District Judge Joan Lefkoe's family?
Well, all right. So this ties into the seriousness and sensitivity toward judges having their home addresses
Right.
put in play here, because Judge Lefkoe was and is a highly accomplished judge on the Northern District bench, and she ruled in a case that involved a litigant, and the litigant was delusional and disgruntled, and invaded her home on the North Side in 2005, February 28th, and in an attempt to murder her, this killer killed her husband and her mother, and it was just a jarring thing
Yeah.
that people at the Dirksen Federal Building still have not forgotten. Nearly 20 years later, and there have been state and federal laws passed aimed at safeguarding judges' addresses as a result of that horrific crime, and so she really was the person that kind of, at least for us in this region and nationally, put on the map why it's important to keep these judges' addresses private.
So are there concerns that what's happening now, could impact how judges rule?
Well, I mean, showing the sensitivity of this. I mean, I had an interview in the piece with U.S. District Judge Virginia Kendall. She's the new chief judge of the Northern District, and that was her concern. She worries that if people, are nervous about their own safety, that it could, create kind of a chilling effect. That people, would be afraid to be doing their jobs, and thus undermine democracy. And so, she had some very serious concerns about what LGIS did,
Yeah.
and the fact that there are still street names of folks out there that are accessible.
Right. And so we're clear, judges are protected from having their personal information made public, but the Illinois Judicial Privacy Act, it does expose gaps for other public employees. Is that
Well,
right?
yeah, I mean, this law that you mentioned, the Judicial Privacy Act, passed in response to the Lefkoe murders. It gives judges the ability to, if they find some place that their home address has been published or aired, they have a right to contact that person or company, and have it taken down within a number of, just a couple of days, 3 days, I believe. And so that did happen here. Once the federal court saw this happening, they did invoke that law, but the law only provides that kind of protection for judges.
Right.
And certainly there are a number of public employees that are in volatile jobs, like prosecutors, law enforcement, prison guards, revenue agents, DCFS caseworkers. The list goes on. Those folks are not afforded that same level of protection.
So what risk does this pose for the other folks on the list, the regular voters who have their addresses and dates of birth now out in the open?
Well, I think the problem was more acute when we were talking millions of people who
Yeah.
had this information out there, because of course identity theft is a main concern, because if you have a date of birth out there for someone and their home address, it makes the job of a bad actor way easier.
Yeah, that's a good
Now
head
there's
start.
still, for sure, and so 76,000 people still are still affected, where internet archiving sites have that information out there from the LGIS sites, but certainly identity theft is a main concern for folks.
And what about folks who might be unwilling now to register to vote? Have you talked to folks who have addressed that issue?
Yeah, I mean, we did talk to to one organization that was, expressed that very concern that if people knew that in filling out voter registration documents where you're asked to provide your home address and date of birth and this other sensitive information, if they had a sense that information wasn't being safeguarded, then it might promote kind of a chilling effect and unwillingness for folks to go to the polls and vote. So that's the other kind of layer to this, that that even though the court, federal courts have ruled and Congress has enacted laws that allow certain information off voter rolls to be made public, there is a concern that if you get too specific, you really could chill the willingness of people to put their information out into the open like this.
Well, leave us with this, Dave. Is there anything that voters can do to protect their personal information?
Well, I mean, the main thing is just kind of keep checking, do what you would do normally if there's a breach in information. I mean, we all get these notices from time to time that, banks or businesses have had our information hacked. And so you need to take similar steps here if you're concerned, and just keep a close eye on your bank accounts and various things. There's no, to be clear, there's no evidence that this case has led to any of that. But it's just smart for people to keep a good eye on their private information.
Absolutely.
Like this.
Yeah, very good practice all around. That's Dave McKinney, WBEZ state politics reporter. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sasha.